Hi, and welcome to What Makes the Academy Exceptional. My name is Dr. Joe Tuitt, and I direct the Office of Admissions here at the Indiana Academy for Science, Mathematics, and Humanities. In this edition, we're going to talk about one of the most impactful aspects of the Academy experience, student life outside the classroom. Whether you're a residential student living on campus or a non-residential student commuting in each day, community is at the heart of everything we do. Joining us is Mr. Paul Douglas, Director of Residential and Student Affairs.
Hello, everybody. My name is Paul Douglas. I'm the Director of Residential and Student Affairs. A little bit about me and how I came to be at the Academy. It starts back to when I was in high school. I had heard about the Indiana Academy. It was a place that I had known about, but wasn't quite sure as far as if I wanted to come to the Academy or not. And there were a lot of push and pulls at those moments as far as friends, commitments, things like that. And so I didn't end up coming to the Indiana Academy, but I knew about it. I had lived around this area, whether it was Marion, Anderson, Muncie, Yorktown, and I was aware of what the Academy was. I went off to college at the University of Evansville. I studied down there, and then I went into the AmeriCorps program. I was stationed out in San Diego, California, working in the Western region states. I did about 10 months of community service, helping different communities and students as far as in different capacities, and really found a passion for giving back and really wanted to be a part of that process. So service was kind of part of what I felt like was important to me. I learned about the Academy again when I was in the smokestack of Idaho, up in Moscow, Idaho, and learned about the student life counselor position. It seemed like an interesting position that was similar or akin to some of the things I had been doing, and was kind of an opportunity to come back closer to home, but also still make an impact. And I think that was very important for me. So I got a chance to come here. I met the individuals who were in charge at the time. Their passions very much aligned with mine. And so I felt like I found a place that I can contribute. I was a student life counselor. That's where I started. And then I have been here now for 25 years. It's really hard to say that out loud, but for myself, I have really been doing a lot of work in different capacities up until this point. But I was a student life counselor first, then I was a team leader, then I became the associate director, and now have been the director of the program for about 6 years. Myself, I have enjoyed the different roles that I've had, but I also feel like each one of those roles has been centered around students and building community and helping them be successful. This place is in my bones. I don't know how else to say it. For myself, I've obviously had a lot of milestones since I've been here. I got my master's while I was here. I've gotten married. I've had children. And so this place is very much in part of who I am. It's part of my identity. And so for me, this place is important. It's special. And I think it's something that I look forward to sharing more information about with you today. What is the Director of Residential and Student Affairs? I'm kind of the principal of student life. So I kind of handle a lot of things outside the classroom. It could be safety, security, working with maintenance, dining. It's also working with the student life counselors, partnering with other groups like mental health and support services, the nurses, academics, all those different groups we kind of pull together to help support students. And so my role is one that I get a chance to work with a lot of amazing individuals, and it keeps my job fun and lively each day. But I also feel like I'm making a difference, which is kind of where I started and kind of where I hope to continue. So that's a little bit about me, my name, my role, and what I do here. I have a lot of information on the website if you want to read more about my bio, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of sense of who I am. And I'm looking forward to talking to you today about the Indiana Academy and the residential and student affairs area of our school. That's a good question. I think we try to help students form connections through a lot of different areas. We have a lot of clubs. We have programs, we have activities, we have different groups that kind of get together and socialize, but there's also just opportunities to put yourself out there. I think sometimes feeling at home can be also decorating your space, right? Students sometimes move into their room and they put a lot of different things on the walls that make them feel like home. Sometimes it's pictures of loved ones or their pet. Sometimes it's just their favorite snacks that they kind of like to have around in case. Sometimes it's that pillow or blanket. Sometimes it's different kind of atmospheres or smells. So I think those are ways sometimes it can feel less like a foreign place and more familiar. And so I think those are wonderful things that students can do, but finding a space and making your own, where you like to study, where you like to hang out, sometimes as far as the things you like to do, finding what those mean and what they will be here. That can be different than back home, but often sometimes you'll find there's a lot of similarities from home to here in those areas. I think for students also, it's important for them to realize that making this place home is part of the investment they need to make. They have to kind of decide, how do I do this? We offer a lot of different things. We try to have a lot of similar activities and programs, whether that's dances or get-togethers, social events. Sometimes it's just a showcase of talents. But those are things that we do, I think, to help bring out what is our community? How does it thrive, and what does it mean, and how do you contribute to that? So I think those are some answers I would give as far as to that. And I think feeling at home for each student is going to be different, but part of it is, I think I would encourage you as parents and students watching this, figure out what are those things that I think if you were packing for a trip that you would want to take with you, that you'd want to have, on your person, that you would enjoy. I think those are important things to consider, and just having those around, I think mementos or things you can grab or use or enjoy, I think that's going to help this place feel like home. And then over time, I think the people, the atmosphere, and other pieces will kind of fall into place. I think part of it is presenting opportunities. I've said before in different presentations that this place, I think we present a lot of resources. It's kind of like a buffet of options. And so I would encourage students to make use of those. I can't do it for you, and we generally don't force a lot of things for students to have to do, but I would say try it and see. The worst case is that that's not something you enjoy, but the best case is you discover something new that you do enjoy that you didn't know you did. And so for a lot of students, I think that's a way for them to feel like they belong here, that they feel connected. And I try to do that in a lot of different ways. Sometimes I'm working the front desk, and as a student comes back, I'm like, hey, welcome back. And they kind of stop for a minute and go, oh, thanks. I think there's a place where just for students, when they feel like they're in a place that they're living, I want them to feel like this is home. This is a place for them to enjoy. This is a place to call their own. This is a place to kind of be away from the world and kind of feel like it's just theirs. And so a lot of times we do that in different ways. But I think personally for me, I try to encourage students to get involved, join a sports team, join a club. Sometimes just talk to your neighbor. It's amazing as far as sometimes just in conversation what you find out about others and how much that I think can mean to your overall development of what this place becomes for you. Because believe it or not, sometimes you're the neighbor they're coming to check in with. And so you sharing about your story, who you are and what you do, I think adds to that element of feeling like, okay, I know my neighbors, I know what's going on around here. I start to feel like I know the people down the hallway. And then that circle, I think, slowly expands on the different things that you're involved with to larger and larger groups. And then there's intersections between groups, and you get to know other people because you know this person. And so I think those are wonderful things that I try to encourage. And I think that's a big thing for students to understand when they come here, that everybody's new. Everybody's trying to figure it out. Nobody has it all together as much as they may seem or present or posture that way. They're all still figuring it out. And so I think important things to keep in mind is being open, being willing, and I think in some ways seizing the opportunities that are presented. I think one way to do that is understanding that you need to respect the individual that's across from you, no matter who they are, both in difference and in similarity. I think it's important to give respect and expect respect. We're going to bring in people from all over the world. Genuinely, international students who have never lived in the United States before. We have people who live hours away from where you are, rural, urban, you name it. We bring in students from all different places. And so I think for students to come here and understand that they have to put forth a little effort, but also they need to understand how to conduct themselves. Being respectful with each other helps you learn and grow. Understanding a different viewpoint that maybe is different than your own doesn't mean you have to agree, but I think it expands your understanding. It helps you grow as an individual and helps you understand more about the world than maybe you did before. And talking to a person who is passionate, who that's their story, that's their life and their circumstance, I think it helps really bring home some of those understandings than what we might see on TV or read or heard or some version of things that can be somewhat stereotypical. So I would encourage as far as students to get a chance to talk with one another, but also be respectful with each other. I think that's where it starts. For myself, I feel like there's a lot of times where feeling safe and supported is a way where, sometimes we have to create that space, right? We have to create a space where for myself, I don't feel like there's a space that represents me, but I'm going to create that space. And I'm not just trying to talk about clubs, but there's interesting places where people find groups and affinity groups that develop out of the fact of a common interest. It could be a common video game. It could be a cultural or ethnic heritage. It could be a celebration of something they've always enjoyed. It could be something that they've wanted to try out or discover, and they decide to just join up. But a lot of those groups, I think, bring people together through something that they are passionate about, they're excited about, that's something they can share as a bonded common thing together versus things that we sometimes focus on that are divisive. And so I think for students to feel safe and supported and feel like they're here in a way that we can help them, it starts with respect, but it also starts with the idea of trying to find others who, I can get to know. They're more than just the person I see in front of me. And the only way I figure that out is if I talk with them. And so I think for students, building community is a conglomerate effort. We all have to put in the time and the effort to do that. And I think the more we invest, the better it becomes. That's a good question. I can think of a lot of different students who've been here over the years, and there's many different stories I could tell you. But one that comes to mind is there was a student who walked in the door their very first day and decided, you know what, I'm going to focus and dial in on just academics, 100%. And so everything else kind of fell by the wayside. They just kind of eat, sleep, do academics, and rinse and repeat. That was kind of their approach. And I would say over the first quarter, they had student life counselors, peer assistants, others saying, hey, you should do this, or hey, you should do that. And they were just dialed in. They were like, nope, I'm just doing this. But over time, they realized as far as that there was some things they still needed to get done, like wellness programs. We have a requirement for students to go to wellness programs. And so they had to go to some wellness programs to graduate, and they realized after about the first quarter of the year, I should probably get on that. So they went to some wellness programs, and sure enough, they met some other people, and those people formed connections, and those connections were things that they were missing. And they found that through those connections, guess what? They kind of went to more programs. They sometimes went to a sporting event. Sometimes they got to do other things. And guess what? Their academics didn't suffer. They were able to add these things in, and it didn't take away from what they were doing. It actually enriched and enhanced those things. And so I got to see this person over time join a sport. And then after that, they decided to help out with one of the local plays because they had some technical knowledge that they had done previously. And so when conversations they were having, a friend said, hey, you should help us with this. And sure enough, they did. And guess what? They added to their circle of friends and connections. And so it really helped them flourish. At the end of their first year, they decided to become a PA because they realized the pitfall they had fallen into. They realized that they wanted to help others. They wanted to try to help them avoid and maybe dispel some of the myths and things that they had thought when they had walked in the door, and helped others really seize the opportunity that I think they were finally finding as they had kind of grown from that understanding. And so they became a PA. I remember them very much on the welcoming days of students moving in, being very excited, almost overly so, but it was almost one of those things where they wanted to make sure people felt welcome. They wanted to make sure people felt heard and connected. And I think they really reached out in a way that really helped expand those students walking in the door to feel like, hey, there's somebody who's a cheerleader. They're looking out for me, somebody I can go to and ask questions. And so I remember seeing them very much grow in that role as like a mentor and as someone who could kind of help others. And so I think they took their experience, they learned from their experience, but they also used that as a catalyst for their experience to help others. And it was amazing to see the people on their floor, the custodial groups that they had, how much they were just doing things all the time, going out to dinner, going to sports games. I would see them like dressed up with like even like sports stuff when they're heading out. They got like yellow and different paint on. They're going to go. I mean, it was just amazing to see this student, how much where they had started almost isolated in their room. We used to joke it was a room hermit, kind of living there, only doing academics, only going to class and eating and sleeping, to then now being kind of flourishing. And guess what? Their academics didn't suffer. In some ways, as far as they found a new skill of time management. They had priorities of academics, but they also had priorities of friends and activities. And so they were able to bring those things together in, I think, a wonderful synergy so they could find that. And I think that time management they learned helped serve them well. I remember them coming toward the end of their time here, coming to talk to me and just mentioning how they had finished a college essay that they had submitted. And it was interesting. They had talked about their experience when they first walked in the door versus where they were now, and how this place, they really put down some roots, and that they used the metaphor of a tree, and how each branch was sometimes a new thing that had grown out of those connections that they had formed, and how they were involved in different things, but also the branches and leaves even more so. They felt like they were passing things on to others who they looked forward to having them be PAs or carrying on the mantle or traditions that they had started of gatherings or meals together and things like that. And so it was just really cool to see a student who started off very much isolated, in my mind, being a catalyst for kind of planting seeds and bringing things in the future going forward to help students be successful. And so that's one story that comes to mind that I think was very, very cool. I think that's one of the cool parts about this school. It sometimes can be a challenge, but I think students living where they go to school really get a chance to cultivate a connection that I don't think can be found really anywhere else. It's fun to see students when they're getting ready to leave for a break, giving hugs, saying goodbye, sometimes talking about how they're going to over break, drive to go see their friends that they just saw, and they may only see, in about 3 or 4 days when they come back, but they want to go hang out because they've formed those deep bonds and strong relationships. It's funny to see parents sometimes bring their kids back, and their students walk in the door and see their friends, and they're instantly like talking and, oh yeah, what'll happen? And the parents feel like they're just kind of, oh, okay, well, I guess we'll leave, and the students are just kind of back into their routines as if nothing has ever happened. And so it's just kind of fun to see that. Students will sometimes jokingly say, and I've had parents tell me that, like, Yep, they said it on the ride home today. I can't wait to get back to the academy. Or man, it's like my second home. And so for parents, that can feel a little bit of a tinge of like, but they also realize too for students that they're finding their place. They're finding their kind of group of friends. And I will say the bonds that are formed here often last a lifetime. I hear stories about people having tables at their weddings of just nothing but academy students because they want them there for those important moments. Or I hear stories about here's what so-and-so is up to and here's what they're doing. And so-and-so said to say hi and I'm going to go down and talk to so-and-so. And it's just amazing when they come back. They're excited to be back here. Just years removed, or sometimes alumni who walk back in the door, they're wanting to go check out the room that they lived in. They're wanting to kind of go see about this. Is this still here? I remember when we did this. Oh, I want to see this. Wow, that's changed. And so there's just there's a place that I think in their minds, this is a moment that they will never forget. This is a space that is very important to them. And so that's just really cool to see. And I think for students and parents alike, it can be a transition, but it's one of those things for students. I think this place feeling like home, it's great to see them decorating the halls during certain holidays, or sometimes walking up to their door and seeing it say happy birthday. And sometimes someone's decorated it overnight and it's like, cool, like people think of me. This feels like my place. And so those moments I think come to mind. Our non-residential students, it's amazing to see them kind of gathering in the lounges. They've had white elephant gift exchanges, had pseudo holiday parties. They've gotten together outside of the school day to go to like a corn maze or a haunted house. It's just really cool to see our students interacting in the lounges. It's this delicate balance. I find myself sometimes trying to make sure that it's somewhat quiet enough for study, but I also don't want to tamp down the overall community that's happening where people are laughing or joking or sometimes being loud or like, oh, I didn't know that. And it's really cool to see the animated faces and the fun stories that are shared. And obviously the lounges are places that everybody has to pass through: teachers, administrators, students, residential, non-residential. So they're kind of a hub of activity. And I think in some ways, people walking in the doors, they instantly like look around, who's here, what's going on, what can I be a part of? And so I think there's a feeling of I want to get connected. I want to see, I don't want to miss out. I feel like there's a lot of stuff going on here. And so I think that feeling of home or connectedness, I think, is a really fun thing that the academy provides that not a lot of other schools get to. And it's because the students get to be here kind of all the time. And so in some ways, there's this continuous flow of information, what's going on, and connection that kind of, I think people want to continue to grow and further. In some ways, feel like if they've just missed a day or a weekend, there's so much to catch up on. And so I think much like when you come home from school and, hey, how was your day? You want to hear what's going on. You want to hear what they've been up to. And so I think their peers are kind of filling some of that role as far as for them to be able to be like, hey, how'd this go? How'd that test go? Oh man, you won't believe. Did you get into congratulations? Those kind of things, I think, in my mind are what, when I look around, I start to see this place feeling like home. This place feels like a separate community. And so it's one that I'm very excited for them to be a part of. And in some ways, just to see them flourishing and creating what this place means. Each year, it's a little bit different. But I think the thread that kind of runs through it is, this is their home. And I like for that to feel like this place is for them. That's a good question. And to be honest with you, it's a two-way street. I feel like we provide a lot of different opportunities for students to get connected. We don't mandate a lot of things that require students to have to attend, but it's a two-way street in the way that I feel like students have to be willing to kind of give a little bit, as much as we're willing to put out there a lot of different opportunities. We'll have SLC stop by and encourage, hey, you should come to this, or hey, I think you'd really enjoy this, or hey, this person's giving a talk about this on campus. I think you should check it out. But ultimately, the student also has to make that choice. I think students who feel disconnected and are seeking often can find different groups and people that they want to connect with and will be welcoming to connect with. But I think students who decide to kind of wait in their rooms and kind of completely be reserved and not kind of venture out or not seek out others, there'll be people who will stop by that will encourage and will try. But there has to be a willingness on both parties, right? When I say it's a two-way street, they have to kind of be willing to meet in the middle to say, hey, we have this opportunity. Hey, we have this going on. How about you attend? How about you come out? How about you try this? I've had students who also sometimes we find out have a certain hidden talent. We had a student who was really gifted at swing dance. And so we kind of encouraged them, like, maybe you'd like to put on a program about swing dancing. And they were like, I mean, I could. That'd be fine. And sure enough, guess what? Right after that club, there were several students who wanted to have a swing dancing club. And so a swing dancing club came from that. And guess what? Then after that, they wanted to play some swing songs at our dance so that they could practice the moves that they had learned. And so that was kind of fun. And some students would look around and be like, this isn't my song. But then a bunch of people would come out and be like, oh, but this is ours. And so again, those are ways where students can find ways to get connected and do things that they enjoy, but they have to be willing to make that step. And so for me, I think it's a lot easier as far as for students to feel connected when they're willing to kind of be open to that connection point. The other thing I would say is early in the year, it's important. Everybody gets here, and I think they're pretty open to finding connections. They're feeling this place out. They're learning about other people. And so I would encourage students at the very beginning when they get here to seek those opportunities out. Sometimes there's a tendency to sit back and to wait. And sometimes those social groups and friend groups form, and then it's harder to kind of join into those. It's not that you can't, but it's one of those things where like the inside jokes develop, the oh, remember when this happened and whatever, and you weren't there. So I've just encouraged students in some ways to hit the ground running when they get here, to find some things, try some things, and see what they enjoy, because I think that's how you can kind of overcome some of that. And if you're ever feeling disconnected, you ever feel like you're not quite figuring out how to get into a group, I think talking to an SLC, we have peer assistants, which are kind of student mentors, who are also making kind of efforts to kind of keep people connected, but also checking in periodically to see if students need anything. And so I think it's great to see the different levels of support that come on and say, hey, how about this? Have you tried this? You should do this. And so for students, I think I would say heed that advice. Understand these people have been here. They know what it takes. And they're not saying this because they have to. They're saying this because they want to help you and in some ways make you feel like, you know what? I can be a part of this too. SLCs do a lot of different things. They really help students, in my mind, as far as learn more about this place, be accountable to the responsibilities of living here. But in a lot of ways, I think they also try to make sure that students feel like, hey, I want to make sure that you're taken care of. Tell me about what's going on. How are you doing? And in some ways, working with other groups. It could be parents. It could be the nurse. It could be mental health and support services. It could be their advisor. It could be a fact that a teacher reaches out and say, hey, this student seemed a little down today. Can you just check in on them? And so again, it's a lot of support that kind of wraps around those students. But the SLCs wear a lot of different hats. Sometimes they're a disciplinarian. Sometimes they're the person who's just driving you to soccer practice. Sometimes they're a sounding board. Sometimes they're that cool mentor that's just a little bit older and has a little bit of life experience that you can kind of talk to. And sometimes it's the person who's just putting on some programs, some activities, some of our dances, or hey, you should come down and we're going to do this. SLCs also have what's called custodial connections. It's where they do different programs and activities just for the students who live around them to kind of help them get to know each other and get to know the SLC a little bit better as well, just so that they feel like there's someone they can turn to. But ultimately, the SLC is a caring adult. It's someone in their lives who kind of adds to the people who care and support this person. And so the student life counselors do a lot of different things, and they try to be kind of a Swiss Army knife or a jack of all trades, if you will, to what the situation calls for. They try to meet students where they are and try to help them with whatever they might need. And so not knowing what that means, each student who walks in the door, it could be a different thing, but they kind of just roll with it and adjust to it. And so I think that's an amazing, fun part about the job of being a student life counselor, but an important one because they kind of fill that void or gap, if you will, as far as in the after school hours of, hey, let's catch up. What's going on? Let's check in. Or sometimes just answering questions, pointing them to resources, or giving them the things that they need. So SLCs do a lot of different things, I think is the short answer, but hopefully that helps explain a little bit more about how they help with that. The short answer, I think, is to give them expectations, opportunities, but also hold them accountable. Students have to learn that having independence comes with those things. It's not just free of responsibility or free of consequence, that there are expectations, and that's something that we hold each student to. Our goal is to make sure that they understand that given this independence, there is a certain expectation that comes along with this. For example, students, we don't wake them up for class. That's on them now. They have to make sure to set alarms to get up, to get enough time to eat, get dressed, get off to class, make sure they have whatever they needed printed and things like that. That's on them. If they oversleep, guess what? They might have a tardy or they might have an unexcused absence. We understand that, guess what? For students, some of this is going to be a learning curve. Even during the first couple weeks, we don't issue groundings. We have conversations. We help them understand, hey, this would normally be a grounding. This is what would be the consequence. We're not doing that just yet, but you need to find some systems. You need to put some things in place in order to navigate and understand how to do this well. And so whether it's check-ins, whether it's curfews, whether it's being places, or even just general time management, making sure they're eating healthy. These are things that I think for students, they need to learn. But the idea of independence here is in a really supportive environment. In my mind, you get a chance to learn some of these things in a place where people are willing to give you grace. They're willing to help you. They're willing to answer questions. They're willing to help you form systems that I think will help you be successful and avoid maybe pitfalls that you might find. And I feel like this place is a place that's helpful to students. It's not as rough as when they go off to college. I remember when my parents drove away, I had to learn a lot of different things. Here, yeah, we'll teach you about laundry. Hey, yeah, we'll help you with learning to navigate mass transit. These are skills that I think, as far as learning this, can help you in the future for the rest of your life. And so independence isn't a bad thing. I know for parents it can be a little bit scary, but it's one of those things where independence is something that we really want to help students learn what that means, and in some ways embrace what that means, so that they can flourish and be successful, not just here, but after here, whatever they do next. I think some skills that come to mind are time management. I think we do that our entire lives. Knowing how to be certain places, allotting time to make sure that we're prepared to do what we need to do, having things, meeting deadlines, and in some ways understanding the responsibilities that we have and figuring out how do we organize those. It could be utilization of certain scheduling apps, or maybe it's using your phone or a written calendar. I think for some students, the idea of growing in different ways is going to be unique to them. Some students come in already having some of these skills. Sometimes they just hone them further while they're here. Some come in really not having ever done this before, at least completely independently. Maybe mom or dad have helped, or brother and sister has helped, but now this is on them. And so I think for students, it could be something as simple as doing the laundry from start to finish, even folding, which some students don't even do that. But it's interesting to see how students learn what those things are for them. I know when I went off to college, I had to learn a lot of things on my own, and it was kind of jumping off the deep end. It was one of those things where I didn't quite understand everything, and sometimes there was a lot of trial and error. While there's trial and error here, I think there's a lot of places that, hey, we'll offer you information on how to do laundry, or how to do better scheduling, or as far as time management. But sometimes it's also finding that balance between academics, fun, not being, too stagnant, but also not being too busy. And I think finding those sweet spots for a lot of students is something that I think they develop while they're here. And it's interesting to see how much they're able to be successful in learning what that looks like. But I think independence for some students is going to be something that they're just honing further. Others, it's going to be adding brand new tools to their tool belt that they will use for the rest of their lives. And I think some students, just by virtue of who they are and what they've done, they've kind of been time tested in certain areas, not just academically, but here they're going to be tested in other ways. And I think sometimes finding those successes to those little tests of life, I think in some ways emboldens them and helps them feel more confident, but also in some ways really exhibit and solidify that independence. I think it can be a lot at first. Students walking in the door, it's a lot of new things, a lot of new information, a lot of new spaces, a lot of new things to navigate. And we do, I think, a pretty good job when students walk in the door with informational sessions, tips and tricks. We have even peer leaders who come alongside them and kind of lock arms and say, hey, I'll show you the ins and outs of the dining hall, or hey, I'll show you how this works, or hey, here's how check-in works, or here's some tips and tricks. And so I think for a lot of students, when they first walk in the door, it's like any new place to anyone. It's kind of like, wow, okay, there's a lot here. What should I focus on? What should my eyes kind of take in? What should be my first step? And so I think we do a good job when people walk in the door to kind of help them understand some things to be thinking about, some things to be looking at, and in some ways, the different resources who will help them navigate what that looks like. But over time, just like anything else, they build routines. Routine kind of builds comfort. And in those routines, there's a certain level of like, I kind of look forward to this. I kind of know what to expect. There's a familiarity. And so I think that kind of then emboldens them to feel a little bit more at home and a little bit more confident. And then it could be little things. I've mentioned before, decorating the halls as far as for certain holidays. Sometimes it's celebrating birthdays. I've seen impromptu birthday parties where they surprise a student. Everybody meets in the lounge. The lights turned off, like, shh, 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 shh. And they kind of come walking in and be like, why did I need to print into this printer instead of the one down there? I didn't think it was broken. It's like, surprise! And like, whoa. And it's like, that's kind of cool. Like, these little moments are things that happen when people start to feel more comfortable, right? They figure out, like, how do I want to create a space that feels more like home, that feels like something that they can be a part of. And so for a lot of people, I think that over time, there is going to be a learning curve. I don't want to pretend like there isn't, but I think we do a lot of things to put in place, resources, supports, but also just, I think, providing opportunities and experiences for people to figure out how to do this their way. Because when students adopt a system that they've come up with, it's going to last. Doing a system that I tell them to do will only last so long before they kind of de-invest, if that's even a word, to say, hey, I'm not going to do this anymore because it's not working for me. And I want students to find something that works for them, because ultimately that's what they'll carry with them. That's what will make this place feel more like home. And I think the other places this feels like home is when you have those shared experiences, when you talk about, hey, at a catathon, when this event happened, or I can't believe this team came from behind and won, or hey, remember at that dance? Oh, I remember when everybody did the line dance. It was so fun. Like there's those moments that everybody can point to and say, yeah, I was there when that happened and I did those things. And so I think those things also start to feel like through shared experiences, that kind of feeling of home. No longer is it something of like, hey, where do I go? What do I do? Now, guess what? You're the ambassador that walks up and say, hi, welcome to the Academy. Let me show you around because you know that information. It's amazing to see students from their junior year coming back their senior year. They walk in like they own the place. I mean, they're barely like, I don't need to do this or do this or that. I know that's for them, but like they're just ready to go. And so it's just interesting to see just in that short time period how much they've kind of evolved and in some ways grown to be like, hey, this is my place. This is where I am. And they're not feeling like a visitor. They're just feeling like, hey, welcome back. Let's keep doing it, And so I think that's really fun to see for students. Yeah, I think students really do a good job of trying to help other students because they have been through it. They share that through stories. They share that through kind of lived experiences. And for some students, sometimes just being willing to come alongside somebody and say, hey, I know this seems scary. This is a little different, but guess what? We're going to get through it. For students, I think sometimes them sharing what happened to them or alumni, we have some alumni on staff right now, they really care and they want to make sure this experience is good. We have countless stories of students who just kind of wrap arms around somebody and say, hey, I know you're going through it right now, but we'll get through this. It's going to be okay. And I think it's interesting to see students when they do that, never knowing where that help is exactly going to come from. Sometimes it's your roommate. Sometimes it's the person next to you in orchestra. Sometimes it's a castmate, a teammate on a sports team. Sometimes it's that person who you just happen to be signed up to do transportation with and you happen to strike up a conversation in the back of the van. But just sometimes hearing that you're not alone, that there are others who've experienced this, and sometimes giving you advice on how to navigate that, I think it gives you a sense of, I can do this. There are students who I see sometimes come in that they've never had to be tutored in their entire lives. Tutoring is not a bad word. Tutoring is just a recognition that, guess what? I need some help. And the sooner I get that help, the better I'll get at whatever this is, and I'll be better on the other side of this. And so for students, I think it's interesting that sometimes when they discover that here, they haven't ever needed to worry about that. Here, learning that skill about seeking out some help is a huge thing because once they do that, it kind of takes that fear, that mystique away that guess what? I can find things instead of trying to, something I don't feel strong in, try to avoid or cover up. I can say, look, let me go figure this out. Let me learn more about this. Let me seek out the resources to help me with this. And those skills are huge. Those resources could be SLCs. SLCs often sometimes just recognize someone seems a little down, seems a little disconnected. Well, hey, how'd you come down and we're going to watch this in my room? Or hey, how about you do this? Sometimes they learn information about students and they realize, hey, guess what? Did you know so-and-so likes this? Well, no, I didn't. Oh, you like that? Yeah. And it's like just planting that little seed and now they're talking and guess what? I'll just step out and let this happen. And so it's amazing to me as far as, SLCs can be information brokers in some ways of just like, as I've talked with this person, I've talked with this person, I've talked with this person, I can find ways to bridge the gap, build connections, and in some ways overcome some of those difficulties of homesickness. And so SLCs, I think, do a great job of also sometimes just presenting moments where students can shine. We have sometimes a talent showcase. Sometimes there's encouraging, hey, you should do this or be a part of this. Sometimes it's designing the ticket for the dance. Sometimes it's helping with the bulletin board. But sometimes those moments of like, hey, good job with that. Or hey, who designed the tickets? Those are really cool. And people are like, that was me. It's like those are kind of moments I think that really help students feel like, you know what? I am connected. This is my space. This is a place that I belong. And so I think those are a couple different ways that that happens. And that's a beautiful thing, I think. I think we do a lot of things here. And so I think that's a big question. And I think for me, it's hard to narrow it down to just a few things. I've talked a little bit about our special events, but like a catathon, it's like a hall Olympics. We take the entire school, administrators, students, teachers, everybody in the school gets divided up and get to put onto 4 teams. We all get to kind of, compete and rib each other a little bit and, show our school spirit. And I think it's one of those things where we all kind of have bragging rights depending on who wins, later. And we're all fun. I mean, it's competitive, but in a healthy way. And I think for students, it sometimes scratches that itch that they've had, whether it's they want to be on academic teams or other things. It's really cool to see how students in some ways get connected through our different events. It could be going to a welcome back dance. It could be as far as little sibs and saying, oh, hey, this is my little brother, and they're thinking about coming here. Or, hey, where are you from? And so it's great to see those connections. We have what's called Academy Awards, which is a kind of a fun tradition. I've had alumni come back and say, oh, I won this award, or I still have this in my college dorm as far as, most likely or best roommate pair, or whatever it might be. And so those are things in some ways are a through line between groups of students who've come through here that they're like, oh, you won that, or you did that. Sometimes there's the most likely to be an SLC or be a teacher. And it's funny how some of them will come back and be like, that was kind of prophetic. I actually am back now. And that's kind of cool. And so those are fun things, I think, for alumni as well as current students to kind of have as a common bond. I think those are wonderful things. I think another thing that we do as far as is just things around the floor. Students in some ways can kind of feel connected by, like I said, doing a collective Sudoku, or maybe they're working on getting this puzzle done, or whatever it might be. It's amazing to see how students in some ways can really feel challenged in a healthy way, but in some ways they also feel like, hey, this is our thing. I mean, they'll finish one puzzle and they'll be ready to ask the SLC, what's the next one? Let's do this. And so in some ways it becomes this is the puzzle group or the puzzle corner, and you kind of bond over that. And so these little things like traditions or rituals that kind of come out of the academy sometimes is based on the student population that we have that year. We had one year where poker was very popular. And I mean, we had like poker chips and poker tables and stuff. And yes, they can't gamble here. We made all that very clear. But it was very funny how they learned all the vernacular about, the river and the run and how you do this. I mean, it was so funny that like there would be every weekend poker games that were happening, and people were so excited about it. Poker tournaments were happening. And again, it was like 3 or 4 years that was happening because students were excited about it. And each year, there's new groups coming in, new interests. And so in some ways, those pockets of individuals, some things carry from year to year to year and have been here for many, many years. Others are kind of almost a glimpse in time where just for a handful of years, this is what happened. But those students who are here, alumni who come back, talk about that as part of the anchor of their experience. And so we do a lot of different things. I think SLCs do a lot of stuff, programs, activities, special events, but the teachers do too. It's amazing to hear some students come back and talk about dressing in bed sheets and having this class period where they pretended to have or recreate something. Sometimes they'll have like a mock trial, or what, in this class when we do this lab, I love every year because this thing happens, or Steve Shue did this thing where he like blew this thing up, and I mean we all love that lesson. And so it's amazing to me to see how students will sometimes talk about their experiences, talk about what they remember, and in some ways ask often, do you guys still do this? Is this still the case? Like they remember that. And I think it's funny. I mean, something that I have tried to change over the years and we haven't yet is our signing in and out system. It's pretty similar, I think, for a lot of the students who've come through here as far as way back when. And some remember their card, their number, their room. I mean, it's just amazing to me to see how students sometimes even want to try their mailbox combination to see if it still works. And so it's those kind of things that I think over time, it's small things as well as big things, collective as well as individual, that I think in some ways gives life to this idea of the experience of the Indiana Academy being uniquely individual, but also encompassing that people can feel like a part of. And so not only in this year, but also looking back and who's done this previous, but also what it's also become. I think people love to see improvements and changes, but they also like to retain and hold on to the really good things. And I think we try to strike a good balance with that, with a lot of the stuff that we do here. That's a great question. I think as parents, you worry about your student, right? Some students coming here are a social butterfly. They could talk to a wall. They'll find their people. It's no problem. Parents aren't necessarily worried about them. But there are other students who it took them a while to find their group. It took them a while to kind of get connected through different clubs or groups. And now they're leaving those places that they've been connected and coming to a new place. And in some ways, it's like unplugging from all those things. Are they going to have a place to plug into when they get here? And what does that look like? And it's being new, it's being different. Sometimes students revert back to some habits that, they've come out of their shell a little bit, but now they're going to be back in their shell. I'm worried they're not going to, get connected. And I think that we do a good job of students, finding their way to connect with others. Now, I will say it's not 100% success rate, but a lot of times it's a two-way street. For us, we want to make sure that students get connected here. And it's one of those things where the people, the services, and the resources that we have available to students are pretty comprehensive. I've mentioned tutoring or mental health and support services, the nurse, but also the programs, the activities. I think for students, as far as kind of coming here, I think the important part is being open to the experience. As far as the experiences, again, will be laid out in front of you, but try some things. It's okay to step out of your comfort zone a little bit. Go to a program, talk to that individual. Sometimes just making a little bit of conversation, it's interesting how much that can lead to furthering finding a club, joining up a sports team. I've had students that were like, hey, you should join this thing. Well, I haven't played for like 2 years. No, you should really join. And then sure enough, guess what? They're the soccer star and they're doing great and they're the captain the next year, their senior year. And it's like, it took that conversation to be the catalyst to then prompt them to try it again. And sure enough, they've just found success, but also they found their group. They found the people they've connected with. And in some ways, something they weren't doing, like I've had students who've never been in a play before say, well, they need one more person to play this part, so I guess I'll do that. And then you know what? They turn into a little bit of a theater kid. They really kind of, find the bug and really enjoy it. And then they're, watching shows with friends and they're going to some of the plays they're here on campus and some of the performances in the studio theater. And it's like, that's how they find their connections. And so I can't say what it's going to be for each individual student, but I will say that we put a lot of different opportunities out there. We try to highly encourage students to be a part of that. And I would encourage you, parents, to encourage your student when they come here. As I've mentioned before, right at the beginning of the year, everybody's open. I think everybody's willing and trying to kind of figure out where they belong and who they're connecting with. And I think while that openness is happening, that's the great time to plug in. That's the great time to kind of get connected. And so I would encourage you to kind of encourage your student to do that. And in some ways, talk to the SLCs. Let them know, hey, here's some hobbies, some interests. We do some surveys where we try to ask you, give us some information about your students so we can figure out how to best connect them. And so we try to, in some ways, continue the care and the thoughtfulness that I know you've put into caring for your child. When they come here, we want them to get connected. We want them to be successful. We want to cheer them on, and we want to find ways to get them connected with the people I think that will mean the most to them. I mean, I'll say I get it. I mean, I am a parent. I have 2 children, and I understand that, my kid living away from home for me can be a pretty scary prospect. The idea of who's going to be, influencing them and playing a role in their lives, who's going to help them with this thing that I know they usually always need help with, who's going to remind them about this thing that they always seem to forget, that can be pretty scary. And I think for me, understanding your student living away from home is something that it's probably 2 years earlier than you expected. But it's also one of those things that it's an important step to take. And I want to emphasize, I think, that taking that step here is so much better than when they go off to college. We have people who are here, not only trained, but willing and coming alongside them to support them while they're learning this stuff. I hear so many stories about students going off to college from being at the academy, and they hit the ground running. It's not just double majors, but they're navigating mass transit. They're going to different clubs. They're able to kind of be involved, the dining, whatever it might be. They have that stuff already. And so they're looking at their roommate who's dealing with homesickness or freaking out about the schedule or where do I go get books or how does this work? And guess what? They already have that stuff. So in my mind, they already have kind of a leg up. They're ready to hit some of that, I would say, upperclassman experience of college right walking in the door because they're already ready to navigate those things and do it well. And so for me, I know it's scary, all right? It's 2 years earlier than you had on your radar. Are they ready? They're a little young. This is a lot to kind of put on them. But keep in mind, if you're thinking about the academy, your student already has a track record in some ways of really being successful and sometimes branching out on their own to be successful. They may have taught themselves a computer language or a foreign language. You never know, but they've sought it out because they want to do it. If they're wanting to come here, they're going to put that same effort and gusto into this experience. And so learning to do that while they're here and in some ways living away from home and learning what that independence is, I know it can be scary. I get it. And I think for some of us, the idea of like, it's a double-edged sword, right? We all want our kids to grow up. We want them to leave the nest. We want them to be successful. But in some ways, we want to do that when we're ready. And sometimes this is them saying, Mom, I think I'm ready. And so we want to support them with that. But it's hard. It's not easy. But I will say, as far as encouraging that, they've been successful in so many things to this point. Let them have this opportunity to show them they can be successful at this. Because I think when they do that, it's a pretty impressive thing, I think, for parents to see. And I hear all the time about how parents have seen such growth from a student as far as when they walked in the door versus when they walk across the stage. And guess what? We get it. We're trying to help them with this independence so that when they shake my hand and walk across the stage at graduation, we're now in their rear view. But hopefully we were able to help them be successful, and then we were this leg of the journey so they're ready for the next one. And so I think that's an important thing to think about. Independence, I know, kind of goes both ways. But that idea of independence and confidence is something that I want students to have while they're here. And in some ways, we want to help them develop that in an appropriate supportive environment so that they're ready for what's next. Yeah, and I've talked a little bit about this, but I think that the growth that happens when people live on their own is not only, I would say, exponential, but I would say it's highly customized to that individual. The things that they learn and grow while they're here, some of that's social confidence, some of that's the idea of confidence and drive. Sometimes it's being challenged by others as far as in an academically rigorous environment and realizing there was more to their best. They actually have another level, another gear that they can shift into. Sometimes being challenged by others to be at the very top of their game in some ways elevates them to feel like, you know what, I can even do more than what I've been doing. And I think for parents, the idea of growth and what that looks like here, it's going to be different. But I can tell you it's pretty well documented, because I think for students, we have parents sometimes send their first, second, third, and in some cases their fifth student here because they see what it means. It's different for each student, but it's equally valuable, because I think for students, sometimes coming here and what they get out of it is going to be different than what their brother or their sister got out of it. But in some ways, some of the commonalities, the I would say the things that they've developed and learned is just as important for that student for what they need. And I think the students realize and parents realize, guess what? Giving them this opportunity, sending to this place, really in some ways is a catalyst. It really kind of spurs that growth in a lot of amazing ways. And I think growth for me is not necessarily linear. I think growth can be not only as far as breadth, but depth. And I think that for students, that growth is one of those things that I think gives them a foundation that they will be able to use for the rest of their lives. There are students who sometimes talk about this place, alumni especially, how this place was a moment in time where they really, in some ways, made a big choice. It was a hard choice. It was kind of a out of their comfort zone moment. But by doing that, it really set them up for success the rest of their lives because they realized they could do it. That growth gave them a sense of like, I wasn't sure, but now I am. So the next thing I'm not sure about, I know I can do it. I just have to now figure out how to do it and what that looks like. And so I think the idea of growth, both residentially, we've talked about sometimes the life skills, time management, those type of those things come along. And I think those are great and they will use those. But I think also that self-confidence, that ability to understand that, guess what? I can do this and I can meet adversity. I can deal with those things. And guess what? I can bounce back. I have a level of resilience that I can, in some ways, when I see the next thing, not be fearful of, but just kind of be like, okay, I got to dial in. Let's do this. And I think that skill, that confidence, that ability, and that growth, to me, is almost such an intangible thing, but so valuable. It's hard to explain to parents exactly what that's going to look like. But in some ways, it's seeing the best of your student in the sense of as they've developed and as they've grown. And you'll see glimpses of it just in conversations and how they're anticipating things and they're already thinking ahead, or they're already communicating better with you because they realize as they've kind of had this experience, some of those skills just start to become innate. And so I don't know if that gives the entirety of the answer to the question, but I think it's amazing to see an alumni and parents talk with them because they will testify that, guess what? It's a noticeable thing. And I've been here long enough to see it happen consistently over and over and over again, that it's not a one-off, it's not a one-time thing, it's not in a special circumstance. It's going to be different for each student, but it happens for each student. And so I think that's a pretty amazing thing. And I know for myself, as a parent, I get it, but I want you to understand, as a parent, wanting your student to be successful, you want to give them every opportunity to do that. And I think this is an amazing opportunity that I would not want you to pass up. Knowing it'll be difficult for you and for your student, but it'll also be an amazing thing for them to say that what they've accomplished, that you can celebrate that with them. And in some ways, they may look back and say, thanks, Mom and Dad, for making that choice, helping to support me in doing this, and helping me be the person I am. So I think those are some things I would say to you. But for me, I love this place. Hopefully you can hear that in some of my answers. I'm happy to talk more with you about any of the things you'd like to know, but I really appreciate you giving me your time today.
Thank you for joining us for this conversation about student life at the Indiana Academy. Whether you're a residential student or a non-residential student, this school is designed to be a place where you find connections, community, and confidence. We invite you to explore more about the Indiana Academy. On your screen, you're going to see a list of different ways to connect with us. You can visit our website, Reach out with questions or schedule a visit to come and see the Academy in action. And definitely submit an application, because no matter where you're coming from and whether you're residential or non-residential, this is where community begins, and we can't wait to welcome you into it.